Good morning, gorgeous. How are you doing this morning or afternoon or whenever you're watching this video? Welcome to my channel. I'm Dr. Michelle Daff, and I'm so happy that you're here today because we're talking about marriage, but not in the normal way that we talk about it. This time we're not focusing so much on your husband as much as we are on your role in that marriage. When two people become one, a lot of times it's very difficult to be able to separate ourselves from our husbands because we live a life and sometimes get enmeshed with one another. But in today's video, we're going to talk about how you, my feminine love, can keep yourself as also a whole separate woman, keep your identity, and not lose yourself in your marriage. This is so important because as someone who is so loving and kind and open and giving, that is who you are and who you've developed yourself to be. But there comes a time where you have to realize that you are also a very important person and pour back into yourself so that you're also fulfilling your purpose, not just as his wife, but your own purpose as yourself. This is going to be one of those videos that kind of opens up some other topics. So we will go into more detail about certain things that we'll talk about today. Today, we're just going to kind of, brush over the things that you need to know. And I will go in greater detail, specifically about communication, about learning how to find activities that really do nurture yourself, and about friendships and how important other people are in your life. So those things we will go into greater detail about in the future. But for today, I want you to go ahead and sit back, relax, get something to drink, get something to write with, and let's talk about this. When you get married, it is one of the most exciting times of your life, and you are just so thrilled to finally be connected to another person in a way where you are building a beautiful life together. You have a journey that you're embarking on that's going to bring so many blessings into your life. However, it is so important to remember that although you're on this journey together, you are still whole. And you also have needs and priorities and expectations that still need to be met. Your job as a wife is definitely to be a helper to your husband. And that is something that requires you to pour out so much of yourself. And although that is part of your job is also to fulfill whatever purpose God gave you for in this world. And this is something that a lot of us often lose when we get married. We start just becoming so used to the day-to-day, so used to caring for our husband's immediate needs, our children's immediate needs, if you have extended family, their needs, and you put yourself on the back burner. This is not one of those messages where I'm telling you that you should be all about you and self-absorbed. Clearly, that is not the case if you're a woman who subscribes to this channel because you are someone who has learned about femininity and you've learned how to pour into those whom you love. So I'm talking to those of you who have created lives where you have given so much of yourself to your husband, to your children, to your marriage that you no longer have you. You no longer see yourself. You no longer have the identity that God gave you. And this is something that most people notice when something disruptive happens in their marriage. So it could be a situation where a person ends up getting divorced. And once they end up divorced or separated, they realize, I don't even know who I am. I've gotten so used to having my life completely catered to my husband that I don't know who I am when he's not here. It could be a situation where, God forbid, a person's husband dies and their assignment as a wife is now finished and they don't know where to even begin. They have no idea who they are anymore because their entire identity was wrapped around only being a wife. This also happens for women who end up feeling miserable in their marriages. It is one of the worst things to be married and to still feel lonely. Because once you're married, your husband is your expected friend and confidant and Everyone just expects you to be able to lean on him for everything. So when you don't have that, you can't go out and get affection from other men. You can't get compliments and attention from other men. The thing that you really need from your husband in terms of having that male bond and love and camaraderie, you really don't have that access to other people for it. So you end up feeling even more lonely than someone who has options. In all of these cases, it's easy for you to then realize, oh my gosh, who am I? What do I want? What do I need? Why am I not taking care of myself? Why am I not making myself important? So it's about keeping your individuality in the way that is respectable in a marriage, where you're not being self-centered and self-absorbed, but you also do have self and you also do care for self. Because in the Word of God, the Lord says to love your neighbor as yourself, meaning you love yourself first. You even know how to love yourself first, because you cannot love another person if you don't know how to love yourself. And in terms of loving yourself, it means that you actually care for yourself. You give to yourself, because love gives. And if you know how to give to yourself, then you will always have your identity in your marriage. So let's talk about some ways that you can honor yourself in your marriage and keep your identity. The first thing is to have self-awareness, to know who you are. This means that you have taken enough time in your day, in your life, to think about your strengths, your weaknesses, what you like and what you don't like. When you start dating your husband, right, you thought about who this man is, you were interested in what he was interested in, you found out what he really enjoyed. Maybe you're one of those people who's pretty permissive and you're just kind of easygoing, I guess you could say. And so maybe whatever he wanted to do, you would just go along with it because you honestly didn't really care. And over time, you always end up doing what he wants to do, going where he wants to go, watching what he wants to watch, maybe even wearing what he wants you to wear. Because I have seen quite a few women over the years who are dressing in a way that their husband, wants them to dress. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I've seen women where they see a dress and it's beautiful and it's like silky and it's shiny and it's really pretty. And they're like, oh, my husband doesn't really want me to wear dresses. My husband wants me to wear jeans because he says that dresses show off my curves too much, even if it's a loose one, right? And that is between her and her husband, or them and their husbands. However, there was sadness in her voice, because wearing a dress is something so feminine and so beautiful, and it makes her feel really good. But she's had to shut that out completely from her life because her husband is very insecure, and not just with this, but in general. And that's what I tend to notice, is that these men have their own sort of proclivities and insecurities, and they put that onto their wives. And over time, their wife may feel very miserable, but they've accepted this because this is part of what they've signed up for. And unfortunately, if you don't even realize that you don't or do like certain things, then you're starting to lose yourself. You start to lose yourself once you don't even realize that this is something that you've given up. This comes into play in terms of his beliefs and his values. Once you get married, you start to adapt to your partner's values and beliefs only because you want to have peace in the home. But there are things that you can disagree on. There are beliefs and values that you can disagree on, because if it's something that is very important to you, maybe it's tied to your faith, or maybe it's tied to an experience, you do not have to completely let that go and take on your husband's belief. Now, some men are very domineering and they will try to force their beliefs onto you. And if you don't accept them, then they choose not to accept you. So it can be very difficult to maintain that sense of self if you're with a man who won't allow you to express yourself or won't accept your form of self-expression when you do. But this is why I want you to think about these things, because these things matter. These things are what govern how you live your life. Some of you ladies are doing things that are completely outside of your will and make you feel very uncomfortable or make you very unhappy, and your husband has no idea. He doesn't even know because you've just gone along with it. And so there comes a point in time in your marriage where you may look up and say, oh my gosh, I am so miserable. Or you might just say like, I feel so out of control. Like things just happen and I have no say. I have no input. I don't like it and I can't complain, right? That's how you know you have stepped so far out from yourself that you are now completely enmeshed with him. So you want to ask yourself, what brings me joy? What brings me fulfillment? What did I like doing before I got married? What did I enjoy doing by myself? What is something that maybe we do together, but I can actually do it by myself and get some fulfillment out of it? For example, me and my husband, we love watching movies. And over the years, we've chosen movies, we watched them together, or like a certain show maybe. And if he watches it without me or I watch it without him, it's a problem, right? Because we're supposed to be watching this together. But, sometimes we end up watching more things that he may enjoy watching because maybe, I don't really care. But he actually has a stronger feeling towards something that he really doesn't want to watch, right? So what I would do is say, okay, before I was married, I would still watch my shows. And I still can watch my shows. I don't have to watch every show with him. I can watch shows on my own, and that is just fine. I can do these things and still have that part of me without having to share it with him. And that brings me to the second point of keeping your boundaries. Boundaries in marriage is an entire topic on its own, and I do think I should do a video on it, but let me know if you want a video on that. There is a really good book called Boundaries that I will link below, and they have a book on marriage specifically. And I think if I do a video, maybe I'll pull from that book. But in marriage, part of why you may struggle with keeping your identity and losing yourself is because you're not having strong boundaries. You have let all of your boundaries down, and there is no line from where you stop and where he begins. A lot of us only want to have boundaries when we're dating because we do want to protect ourselves and put up a wall, and we want to have standards that he knows how to abide by. We want to make sure that we're being treated the way that we want to be treated. So we create these very strong boundaries. But once we get married, a lot of times those boundaries go away, and they should for a lot of reasons. But in marriage comes a new place to create new boundaries. You're not dealing with the same things like don't call me after 10 o'clock, right? Obviously, he's not calling you because he lives with you. So you don't need certain boundaries, but maybe you don't want to be bothered when you're reading your book, or maybe you don't want him going through your emails. Maybe you want to make sure that he has his emails, you have your emails, and you don't go through one another's. And it's not because you're hiding anything, but because it helps you to be able to know that you have something that's just yours. Maybe you're planning a birthday party for him, and because he's always going through your emails, he sees everything you're doing and you can't even do something nice for him. Your reasons are your reasons. They're yours. But there are certain things in marriage that you still can have boundaries with, and you still should. And you will know if it's something that you need a boundary for because you will feel awful when he does it. And it's one of those things that does require wisdom and talking to God, getting understanding, and talking to people who are seasoned. They've been married for a long time and happily married for a long time, successfully married for a long time, or marriage counselors or therapists or people who can guide you in this, because there may be things that you may not know if this is a personal boundary or it's just you being obnoxious or it's just something that comes with marriage. There are those things too, but there are certain things that are personal boundaries that you personally feel uncomfortable with, and those things are okay to share. And this comes to the point of communicating, letting your husband know that you really would prefer if he did things this way, or you really don't like when he does this, or you really want to be able to do this. And, I cannot tell you what your boundaries should be. Everyone is different. And I know that growing up in my house, I had a lot of things that were just mine. And that's how my mom raised us. We had a lot of things that were just ours that are not necessarily ordinary things. And I've talked about this on my podcast quite a bit, but we had like our own cups in the kitchen. No one could drink out of anyone else's cup. And the thought of someone drinking out of my cup because everyone's cup was like a different color was absurd. Like, you just didn't do it, right? So I never had to share cups. We didn't drive each other's cars. So my mom had her car, my sister had her car, I had my car. We never, ever, ever, ever drove each other's cars. Now, in other households, like, that is completely normal. Everyone drives everyone's car. It's no big deal. But what happens when you're raised in an environment like that and then you get married? And now my husband's driving my car and I'm like, that's my car, Or he's drinking out of my cup and I'm like, are you seriously drinking out of my cup? Do you know how crazy that would sound? And for me, I personally may feel very uncomfortable with it, but it's also a very normal part of marriage, right? So maybe the cup, I would have to be, counseled and told, okay, that is normal. Like, if you have one cup or two cups that are just yours, fine. But like, to completely separate cups, what's the purpose? What's the point? What is the point? Maybe the car, you could say, I really just want to have my car. I want to have my own car. I want this just to be my personal space. I don't really have that. And this is what I want as mine. And maybe that might be okay in your marriage. But your husband may not understand, and he doesn't have to understand with everything. If you have that open dialogue and if you're able to come to an agreement, then it's wonderful. But at least share how you feel. When it comes to femininity, it's all about how we feel and honoring our feelings, honoring the things that make us feel uncomfortable in our body. At least tell him. If he laughs at you or, whatever else he does, then you may have other issues in your marriage to deal with. But the problem is a lot of women are not even saying anything. They're not even sharing it because you might feel scared. You might feel nervous to ruin your happy marriage or happy moments, but you're still unhappy. And that's the issue. You're still unhappy. And is it okay for you to be miserable in your marriage and for your husband to be happy? Absolutely not. He is responsible for making sure that the home runs in a smooth way. And it only runs in a smooth way when needs are being met. These are part of your emotional needs, and it's important for you to establish healthy boundaries in all aspects of your marriage with the things that you do or don't like, do or don't want, are comfortable with, are not comfortable with, whatever it is. There needs to be conversation. Another way that you can keep yourself from not losing yourself in marriage is understanding your core identity. This again comes back to this idea that you are now married, you have the same last name, you live in the same house, everything is just the same, right? You eat the same food, you can finish each other's sentences, you're like the same person, but you're not the same person. You are a different person. And coming back to your true identity is what's going to help root you and establish you in who you are. So maybe you have a different cultural background than he does. Maybe you have the same background, but you come from a different village or different city than he does. Are you eating the foods that you enjoy eating? Are you cooking the foods that you enjoyed as a child? Are you doing what you want to do based on who you are? This really comes into play when it comes to your spirituality. If you're someone who is in Christ, you have your spirituality as probably the biggest aspect of who you are, because that's where your identity really starts. It's from God. God is the one who created you and who gives you your identity. But if you are so enmeshed with your husband, so obsessed with him, so in love with him, or just so used to serving him and you've forgotten about your identity in Christ, then you're not serving yourself and you're also not making God very happy, because he wants to always be first, regardless of who you're married to, how long you've been married, what your responsibilities are in life. God wants to come first, and he does not want any God put before him. And unfortunately, some women have made their husbands a god, have made their marriage a god. So that is the utmost important thing, is making sure that they are a great wife, keeping a great home, and their marriage is intact. And that's great. In and of itself, that's fantastic. but it's not more important than God and your relationship with God. So are you honoring your spiritual time? Are you spending time with God? Are you considering God in the things that you and your husband do, the things that he asks you to do, the places that you go, the things that you watch, the things that you listen to, the way that you live your lifestyle in your home? Or do you turn a blind eye completely and participate in those things because your husband wants you to? Who is more important? And this is something that you need to reflect upon and ask yourself, because the more you move away from your identity, the more miserable you're going to become, and the more you're going to fall into sin, which will automatically make you depressed and miserable, because that's what sin does. So you want to check and ensure that you're established in your core identity and in your core beliefs. You can also maintain your identity in your marriage and not lose yourself by prioritizing self-care. This comes back down to you seeing yourself as the beautiful feminine woman that you are, as the woman that you even were before you got married. You were still somebody and you still are somebody. You're not just somebody's wife. Okay, you're not just somebody's wife. You are your own person. You are Juliet. You are Vanessa. I know I say Vanessa a lot because God always puts Vanessa in my head, whoever you are, Vanessa. You are Crystal, you are Veronica. You are the woman that God created you to be. And that is the beautiful part of life, is that you're always changing and moving and growing. And if you never had this man again, if this man woke up one day and just said, you know what, I don't love you anymore, and left, who are you? You're still Dejanay. You're still Dejanay with or without him. And who is Dejanay though? What does Dejanay do for herself? Do you spend time caring for yourself? Do you have any hobbies? Is there something you used to do all the time before you got married and then you just stopped? Is there something that you could make time for? You don't have time. Who has time? You can make time for it because it brings you joy. Maybe your husband thinks it's silly or doesn't approve of it, or thinks it's too expensive, or whatever the case might be, but it's what brings you joy. Have you totally discarded it because you want to please him? These are things I want you to consider. You can do things to tap back into yourself by disconnecting with this world, disconnecting from social media, technology, just removing yourself from it and doing things on your own. Physical care, your physical activities like your workouts and your stretches, and just that time where you're nourishing your body and you're caring for your body does wonders in terms of maintaining you. And I say that too because oftentimes women who have gone through painful situations like divorces and like separations or even deaths of their husband find that is one of the most difficult things to bounce back from, is the way that they look, their physical appearance. Say you do want to start dating again. You may feel so bad in terms of your self-esteem because you don't like the way you look. And maybe over time, you've just gotten so comfortable in your marriage that you just stopped. You stopped putting care into the way that you look. And that's so difficult to pick up, once you're already feeling a little bit lower. Whenever you have routines and you maintain a certain lifestyle, that consistency keeps you in check when things go haywire. That's what you need to anchor yourself. Even if it's not a divorce, but the marriage is just maybe going through a tough time, those routines that you have for yourself are what help to just clear your mind and help you stay motivated, help you stay positive, help you stay strong. And keeps you looking good, okay? Because when you look good, you feel better about yourself. At least hey, I'm a good thing. I'm a good person, and I like the way I am. I like the way I look. I like the way I act. I like me. Even if you don't right now, I do. And that's the attitude that I invite you to adopt. Even if you don't right now, I do. A beautiful way of ensuring that you don't lose yourself in marriage is just by connecting. First of all, connecting with yourself, taking time to take care of your body, taking time to journal, write down your thoughts, pray, write down your desires and your wishes. So many times before you got married, you had a whole vision board, you had a whole diary full of things, you had lists, you had all these things that documented what you wanted for your life. But once you get married, a lot of times it's like all that stuff just goes away. All the things that you wanted to do, the places you wanted to travel, the personal interests that you had, the goals that you had for yourself, they just get put on the back burner. I've seen so many women who tell me that they wanted to go back to school. They wanted to go and get another degree or get one degree, but they just didn't think they could because they were married and they had to be a wife and do wifely duties. And there was just no time for that. And that was just so sad to hear, because at the end of the day, couples who were in these programs that I attended during my bachelor's, master's, and doctorates, many of them were married. And one partner had to sacrifice for a couple of years for the other one to finish the degree. And it was a beautiful thing to see women in there who were pregnant, women in there who had 5 children, women who were much older, saying, you know what, this is what I desire to do. This is what's going to help me in my life, in my career, in my purpose, and I need to do it. I need to put myself first in this situation. It's not forever. It's just for a couple of years and it'll be over. And then I'll be able to have this thing that will really benefit myself and my family. So don't give up on the things that you know are so important to you because you're married. The key really is communication. How you communicate these things to your husband, having the right timing in terms of these things. And that comes from communication. You know, you tell him, hey, hun, I really want to travel to Dubai, let's just say. And I have always wanted to go there. And it was on my bucket list. And I just never talked to you about it because I thought I would do it before we got married. But I really want to do this. Is it something we can do? Do you think we can do that? Can you make that happen for us? Or maybe you want to go with your friends, or you want to go with your sister or your mother. You know, I mean, it's a conversation. He can say, well, right now it's not really in the budget, but I do think that we should do this. So let's make it happen at some point. Instead of just being miserable that everyone else gets to go places and you never get to go anywhere, that your husband only wants to take road trips on the weekends. Everything comes back to communication. And sometimes you need other people to communicate with. You need to have friendships and relationships to help nurture yourself in order for you to just be rejuvenated and restored. Because your husband is not everything to you. He cannot be. He cannot be everything to you. You must have other relationships that speak to other parts of who you are. And that's why it's so important to get yourself involved as much as you can. There are so many groups and communities that walk together. You have church family. You have people in your personal interest groups. Maybe you should start swimming or playing tennis, or maybe you should get into an online community where you can chat with other women about things that you are interested in. But these communities and these interactions with other people actually help you grow, and they help enrich you as a person, which will automatically enrich your marriage. So, again, we'll go into more detail about these things, but there are times when it comes to your identity and yourself and the communication issues with your husband where you do need to involve another person. You need to involve a therapist, and you need to go and talk to a professional that can help just sort of dismantle all of the ugliness and get down to the core issues and help to separate both of you in a healthy way to bring you back together. Because marriage is so beautiful and it's so important, and it's wonderful that you love your husband so much that you're willing to give up of yourself completely to him. Sacrifice is necessary and sacrifice is important, but compromise is also necessary when it comes to ensuring that both people are healthy and happy in the marriage. The marriage is flowing well, that you're communicating, that you're not just roommates, that you're not constantly in each other's faces and angry about things, that you're actually in a loving, healthy, happy marriage. And you can be in one. I would recommend that if you feel that you are struggling with this, to speak to a therapist, to speak to your husband, but first to speak to God, because God is a healer. And he does heal marriages. He does renew and restore marriages. And he can make your marriage completely brand new as he renews you. So If you feel like you've just fallen away from yourself, you don't know who you are anymore, you look at yourself in the mirror and you're like, who is this person? You feel completely enmeshed with your husband that you don't have your own identity. You're always waiting for him to come home. You're always waiting for him to do anything. You can't do anything on your own. You don't feel happy and joyful without him. Then I invite you to think about this. I invite you to pray about this and talk to me. Leave me a comment and let me know what areas can you really grow in? What would you like me to make a video about? What have you done in your personal marriage to help keep your identity, but still love, support, sacrifice, and show up for your husband? We would love to know. For those of you who love marriage content, who want more content on, just learning how to be a beautiful, wonderful wife, for those of you who struggle with certain things in your marriage that doesn't really get talked about enough, and you really want specific advice about handling your husband with love, and for those of you who want a community of feminine women to be a part of, I invite you to listen to my podcast called The Dr. Dap Show, and we go into great detail about marriage, and I have lots of podcasts that talk about being a wife in a godly way, being a wife in a feminine way, learning how to talk to your husband and deal with your husband with the issues that may be a little bit controversial in the world, but will bless your marriage. So you can find me there, and you can also reach out to me on Instagram at The Dr. Dap Show, at Dr. Michelle Daff. And until next time, my love, remember that in all things you do, make a feminine impression. Bye-bye.